they'll buy just about anything.
I get it. You're angry. Listen, I understand the hesitation with the announcement that Starfield is going to be locked to 30 frames for the Xbox Series S and X. It's really not that bad. Games have gotten away with 30 frames and I'm looking at Tears of the Kingdom.
But bro, it's like for Switch.
Well, yeah, and Starfield is arguably a more ambitious game than this Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts looking ass game.
She can't do that. Shoot her or something.
I'm fine with this game being locked at 30 if it means that every other aspect of this game is going to be hitting the right type of beats. Yes, it's a first-person shooter, but it's a single-player game devoid of any competitive aspect. After watching the Bethesda showcase of the game, I can make a pretty good educated guess that this game has a lot of background systems in play in order to create this open space experience. I can also understand the argument that Microsoft and Xbox marketed this new game console as this capable machine. 4K and 60 frames per second should be the new normal for video games at this period in time. It's what Xbox and PlayStation have been promoting time and time again. Realistically speaking, rarely do we see games running at both native 4K and a smooth 60 frames. The one thing I would love for Xbox to stop doing is to overpromise power. They did the exact same thing with Xbox One X, and I only had a handful of games that ran at 4K. The rest of the time, I was lucky enough to get a 1080p game that was running smoothly with 60 frames without any issues or frame drops.
Oh, you see this guy? See this guy? Number one bullshit guy.
I'm kind of going off topic now, but what I'm trying to say is that Starfield has a pretty good shot of providing an amazing gameplay experience without the help of 60 frames. People who are making this a bigger deal than it needs to be, while great for expecting more from these bigger game companies, should commend Bethesda for acknowledging that their product might not run as smoothly if they let the opinions of fans persuade their decision making.
Now let me be clear.
I say all of this with the understanding that Bethesda delivers on every other aspect of gameplay they have promised so far. If this is another Redfall or even worse, a No Man's Sky situation, then they can go f themselves. But I have a pretty good feeling that this game is going to be a solid choice for Game of the Year. I recently went back and played games like Far Cry 5 and New Dawn, which were first-person 30 frames per second games on Xbox One X, and I honestly had a lot of fun. The frames didn't bother me as much because the gameplay loop and mechanics were a blast to understand and to just mess around in. Same goes with Cyberpunk 2077 on Series X. This is probably an unpopular opinion, but I think that the ray tracing mode is the much better option to choose from and makes the world a treat to look at. The 30 frames per second gunplay does feel a little sluggish in that game, but overall the cinematic feeling of walking around Night City offsets some of the negative aspects of playing at a lower frame rate. And yes, the best case scenario is playing 4K at 60 frames for these games using a PC, but this option is just not that accessible for an average consumer. I know it is a bit different to compare an adventure game, but I also went back and played Immortals Phoenix Rising and The Witcher 3, which both have performance and resolution options that locks frames at 30 frames. Again, probably a real unpopular opinion, but for these non-competitive games, I'd rather immerse myself in a detailed environment and sacrifice 60 frames since it really doesn't affect my enjoyment of the game.
What the hell going on up in here?
If the gameplay loop and controls are on point for that game, then I prefer resolution and visual effects over a 1080p resolution and 60 frames. Now, if Starfield had multiplayer and the foundation for that game mimicked Redfall, then yeah, I'd be pretty pissed too. But I played a game like Skyrim at 60 frames for years and have like over 400 hours playing that game without ever complaining about frames. So I think we're fine with Starfield being at 30 until we get our hands on the game and we can judge for ourselves.